and stitcher Donna Duncan. Welcome back to my sewing room. This is the second in a series of short videos on how I create free motion thread sketches. In the last video, I talked about the materials and the products I use. In this video, I will demonstrate how I transfer the image to the canvas. Free motion stitches can be almost impossible to remove, so I find it useful to have a few lines I can follow, even for the simplest of designs. I've tried several methods, but this is the approach I typically use. I hope you find something useful that you can adapt to your projects and your style. Just remember, there are no rules. Let's get started. For this demonstration, I am using a picture I recently sketched from a photo I took in our neighborhood. Oblation Paper and Press has a typewriter station in front of their store. It was a beautiful fall day, and I thought it would make a charming thread sketch. The original small pencil sketch went to a loved one in the form of a greeting card, but I always take photos of my completed projects, so today I'm using this enlarged photocopy of the original pencil sketch. So I've cut a piece of canvas slightly larger than our picture, and I've pressed all of the wrinkles out of the canvas. I've cut a piece of self-adhesive tearaway stabilizer for the back, and you just tear that away, if I can catch the corner of it, and press it onto the back. And I've cut a second piece of non-adhesive tearaway stabilizer for the back. Sometimes I do not apply the second tearaway to the back until after the water rinse step, and you'll see why later. For now, I will use both layers. I've also cut a piece of water-soluble transparent film stabilizer, slightly larger than my picture. And I tape that down so that it doesn't shift while I'm tracing the picture. So I'll tape it at each corner. I'm going to tape it on this corner because the whole piece of the paper is showing and it'll hold it in place. And sometimes I leave one corner up, and that's still going to shift a little bit. So I'm going to, because I do not want my picture moving once I start. Okay, so our picture is stable and it's not going to move anywhere. Now that you have it taped down securely so it won't shift, we're going to use a Sharpie permanent marker, ultra fine point, to draw the lines we want to stitch. I've already drawn some of these lines. For me, I want to draw any of the lines that will keep the perspective of the picture. And that's a lot of the straight lines, because I may not sew them quite as straight as I want them to be. So I've captured the lines of the building, the lines in the sidewalk, and the cart. I know when I was sketching this, I had trouble with the chair, so I will also trace the chair. And looking at this upside down, I'm just going to have to trust my lines and follow them. There's a little building line. And the typewriter. I'm not going to trace the glass right now, the flowers. That was something I added, and I'll use that as a demonstration in the next video on how to stage and audition additional features. And once you think you have all of the lines drawn, you can pick up the corner and look at it to see that you have everything you want. It's hard to see the lines that have been drawn to the transparent film, so to give you a better idea, I'll slide this piece of plain white copy paper below, and then it makes it easier to see what you're transferring to the canvas. We have the lines of the sidewalk, the building and the windows, the just basic of the awning, the chair, the cart, and a little bit of the typewriter. So you can transfer as much or as little as you feel comfortable with. So I think we're ready to apply it to our canvas and start sewing. So before we take our first stitch, we're going to set up the machine for free motion stitching. That's dropping these feed dog, and that's usually a mechanical button at the side of your machine. And then we replace this straight stitch or zigzag stitch presser foot with the darning or quilting foot that sort of floats over your fabric. And it does not matter at this point if the bobbin thread matches the top thread or your canvas, either will work. I like using the knee control to raise and lower the presser foot. Your machine may have a lever back here or a button on the front. I just have become so used to using the knee lever that I, even when it's not, the lever's not there, my knee is moving it or trying to. That's just personal preference. My Bernina has a stitch regulator that I like using for quilting, but I prefer not to use it for thread sketching. It gives me a little more control, and again, that's just personal preference. One other thing I like to do is I like to decrease the upper thread tension. Mine is normally set at 5.25, and I set it down to 3. And for the purpose of this video, I've turned off the light to my sewing machine because it was such a glare you couldn't see the stitches. So we'll see how that works out. For the outline, I use a dark thread, either cotton or polyester. You could use rayon, but these threads, rayons are more expensive, and the first few lines will be covered by more thread as you stitch the details later on. I've tried using lighter thread, but if you add color to your canvas before stitching detail, the light colored thread could take on the paint and then make it hard to follow later when adding the detail. So I think with that, we're ready to go. And I like to pull up my bobbin thread so that I don't get a nest of thread underneath. And now I'm going to pull it out of the way and cut it off so I'm not distracted by it. And then we're just ready, and we're just going to move the fabric following our lines. You don't have to be worried about the length of the stitches or stitching over previous stitches. Just best to stay on the line, and you can see there I veered off the line a little bit, but it doesn't really matter. it's your picture. You can come back and fix it or enhance it later on. And that's part of the awning anyway, so it'll move around. And you can see in a couple places I'm even stitching where there aren't any lines. But I keep my picture that I traced, from which I traced, at my side so I can look at it and refer to it. And these are the lines at the front of the building. We'll catch this line that intersects with the leg of the chair while we're here. There's another wall line that we'll capture while we're here. So the chair is done, and we'll just continue on with another part of the picture. Maybe we'll go back over here to these flower pots. Go ahead and get the typewriter while we're in here. I didn't draw any of the lines for the keys because those keys are small. We'll have to be careful how much thread we add to that. We'll have to plan how we stitch that. Too much thread and it could look messy and lose the lines or the look of the keys. So we'll talk about that in the next video, adding detail. Now the little piece of paper sticking out of the top. Head back over to where we started stitching the typewriter and back around to the table. And we'll go down the legs. Here's the leg, and then here's the tire. Now it's time to look it over closely, make sure we have completed all the lines we want to make, and it looks like we have. You can see what it looks like on the back side. Sometimes you can tell a little bit better from the back because you still have the lines of the ink, the permanent marker, disturbing the front. So anyways, once you're happy with all the lines that you've sewn, I try to remove as much of the water-soluble stabilizer as possible. Some of these larger pieces I keep because I can use them for staging and auditioning elements into thread sketches. We'll even do that in the next video. When dampened, this just becomes a starch actually. So if I have clean stabilizer without ink on it, I put it in a baggie and save it, and then put it into a spray bottle and make spray starch out of it to stiffen fabrics and stuff that I sew on. But with the ink on it, I don't like doing that. So the smaller pieces I will just throw away. And the larger pieces go into a baggie for future use. Sometimes if I don't back tack or take care of the ends, I may lose a few stitches at the beginning or the ending of a line of stitching, but this is just the outline, so it doesn't matter to me. And the more you remove, the less you have to struggle with the marker being left behind. So I think you get the idea here. And now you can start to see the picture coming through. And I think we've removed just about all that we can easily. So we're going to take this to the sink and run some water over it and prepare to add some color. So now we're just running some warm water over the thread sketch. And the stabilizer will just melt away. You can place it in a tub of water as well. Sometimes if you use less stabilizer, you can just use a spritz bottle to spray it on, but if I've used a lot of permanent marker, I don't want it on my picture, or on my canvas. So I think that's all there is. I don't see any stabilizer or marker left. So I have a beach towel that I use. I just wrap it up in my beach towel and roll it. And we're back to the sewing room. We're back in my sewing room, and you can just let this dry on its own and press out any wrinkles that come into it as it dries, but I'm never that patient, so I'm going to cover my pressing board with a clean dish towel and then layer the dish towel over the top of it and just press it dry a little bit. And we'll look at the stabilizer on the back to see how well it held up through the rinse cycle. And see how wrinkled that is. So I'm just going to tear that off. I'm not going to worry about getting all the pieces inside each element off, but around the edges I'm going to tear it away. And it just pretty much, it comes off very easily. And then we'll add another piece before we start stitching the detail. Then we won't have to worry about those pieces causing us difficulty with wrinkles. And you can just press the iron directly to the back side, it won't hurt it. Especially with the thread that we're using, it won't cause any problems. Some of the threads I'm always worried that they might melt or lose some of their shine if we press right on them. Or use an iron that's too hot. Now it's still somewhat damp, but sometimes I like it to be slightly damp when I add color. So here you can see the basic outline of your thread sketch. So now we're ready to talk about adding paint or some kind of color to your picture. You can actually treat or add color to your thread sketch at any point. The problem with adding color before rinsing away stabilizer, some of the paint will wash away or run depending on the paints used. And if adding at the end, care needs to be taken not to paint over your stitches. So in another segment in this video, I will show you some examples of different paints and processes I've used to add color. For this one, I've decided just to add a little color to the awning and then fill in a little bit of area for shadows. So the awning at the Oblation was actually white, but I think I'll add some color. And it'll just be a really light, dry brush. And I've tested some colors on my sample canvas here, and I have a couple of really old paintbrushes, cheap paintbrushes. I hope they hold up to it. So I'm just going to put a little bit of paint on here, and this is actually, these luminaires are really wonderful paints. I use them on my wood carvings, and I use them in regular paper sketches, and I love them on the fabric too. So I've just blotted my paintbrush. It's a dry brush, hasn't been into the water yet, and I'm just going to kind of add a little bit of color right oh darn, this is my shadow color. Well, we'll figure it out later. I actually started putting my shadow color up on the awning, but I can take care of it. I never get too worried about mistakes, so I can usually fix them. So I'm going to use this nice bronzy color for the shadow. I sometimes will use grays, but this is a fall color, and I want to try to retain much of the fall feeling as I can. And it just takes a little bit of paint. And then I'm also going to add a little bit of this maybe to the window. Just have a little bit of paint left. I'm going to just put in underneath here. So let me see what I can do with that awning, since I've already started to put some gold on it, or bronze. I've picked out this really nice green to go up there. I think it'll be fine. And I think that's about all I'm going to add. As in the way of color. In this basket thread sketch, I treated the fabric before transferring the outline. I crumpled the dampened canvas and then carefully flattened it without smoothing the wrinkles. I used acrylic paint and lightly swept a dry brush across the ridges of the remaining wrinkles. The shadow around the baskets was added after the stitching was completed. In this picture of a St. John's Bridge thread sketch, I first stitched the basic outlines, then used the cyanotype process to turn the fabric blue before stitching the details. After stitching was completed, a dry brush was used to apply white sparkling paint to create the illusion of fog. Here, in a thread sketch of Portland's beautiful Tillicum Crossing Bridge, the outlines have been stitched and acrylic paint added to water and sky. Before stitching the bridge, watercolor pencils were used to create the Max train on the bridge and the buildings in the background. Using thread for such a detailed background would have distracted from the bridge detail. Well, that's all there is to transferring an image to the canvas. In my next video, I will be doing less talking and more sewing to demonstrate how to use free motion stitches, upper thread tension, and a complementary color in the bobbin to create the look you want in a thread sketch. In the meantime, please click follow on my Urban Stitcher Facebook page so you'll know when that video, as well as other new thread sketches, are posted and ready for viewing. Thanks for watching.